Little Fox.
The Little Mermaid. Chapter 10. The Sea Witch. The Sea Witch watched the mermaid closely.
"I will prepare a magic brew for you,"
she said.
"that will change your tail into legs and feet."
"How wonderful!"
cried the Little Mermaid.
"With legs, I can walk on land and be near my prince. Then surely he will fall in love with me."
"I must warn you,"
continued the Sea Witch.
"you will feel a lot of pain whenever you stand. To others, your walk will look graceful, like a dancer's. But every step will sting like a sharp blade cutting into your feet."
The Sea Witch paused to pet one of her frogs. Then she asked her,
"Are you willing to suffer for what you desire?"
"Yes, of course,"
replied the Little Mermaid excitedly.
"I would do anything to live in the upper world and get a soul."
"Remember,"
said the witch,
"once you become human, you can never be a mermaid again. You will no longer live in your father's palace or play with your sisters. You can no longer ask your grandmother for advice. You can never come back to the Sea Kingdom again."
"I understand,"
said the Little Mermaid softly. The Sea Witch bent down and looked right into the mermaid's eyes.
"One more thing, my dear,"
she added.
"If the prince doesn't marry you, you will not get your soul. And the morning after he marries another, you will die and become sea foam."
"I will take that risk,"
said the mermaid, turning pale.
"I just know I can make the prince fall in love with me."
"Well, my dear, to seal our deal, you must give me something of value,"
said the witch.
"You have the sweetest voice of all the mermaids. Everyone says it is very special. I will give you the brew if you give me your voice."
"But I'll need my voice to tell the prince,"
said the mermaid.
"So, have you lost your courage now?"
asked the Sea Witch, laughing.
"No,"
the Little Mermaid answered. She thought of the times she sang for her family. Remembering those happy moments, the Little Mermaid felt very sad. Slowly, she whispered,
"I will give you my voice."
"Then follow me."
The Sea Witch took the Little Mermaid into her hut. Once inside, the witch placed a large pot over a steaming hole in the floor. She chopped up some snakes and jellyfish. She threw the pieces into the pot with some other slimy things. Then the Sea Witch chanted,
"The Little Mermaid asks to love a prince who only lives above. Now that her heart has made its choice, she'll have her legs, I'll have her voice."
The liquid began to bubble. Smoky, ghostly faces rose from the pot. The magic brew was ready, and the witch poured it into a small bottle.
"Here is what you came for,"
said the Sea Witch. She handed the bottle to the Little Mermaid. The mermaid tried to say something, but no sound came out. Her beautiful voice was gone.
"Before sunrise, swim to shore,"
the Sea Witch commanded.
"When you are on dry land, drink the brew I gave you. Your tail will split in half and become a pair of legs and feet. Now go."
The Little Mermaid nodded silently. The Little Mermaid, Chapter 11, Inside the Prince's Palace. The Little Mermaid wanted to see her family before she left. But when she reached her father's palace, everyone was asleep. She felt a great sadness.
I'm leaving my home forever,
She thought.
and I can't even say goodbye.
Then, just before dawn, she swam to the cliffs near the prince's palace. The Little Mermaid could see the balcony after she crawled up on the rocks. Once on shore, she swallowed the bitter brew. Suddenly, she felt a horrible pain, like a sword striking her tiny body. As she fainted, the Little Mermaid saw her tail begin to split in two. When she awoke, she found herself on a velvet couch. Her body was covered by a cape. She looked up and saw the prince standing over her.
I found you lying on the rocks.
The prince said.
Who are you and where do you come from?
I am your true love.
She wanted to say,
I saved you from the sea.
but of course she could not speak. So she smiled at the prince, hoping he would understand.
Come now, don't be frightened.
The prince said warmly. But the Little Mermaid could only look at him with love.
What is your name?
He asked. The mermaid was silent. Finally, he said,
I do not know why you will not speak, but you still need my aid.
The prince helped the Little Mermaid stand up. As the sea witch had warned, every footstep felt as if she were walking on knives. Yet to the prince, she looked perfect. As they walked, she glided through the halls as lightly as a cloud.
How graceful you are.
The prince said as he led her into his rooms. He called his servants and ordered them to bring some clothes.
Dress her as an honored guest of the royal palace.
He commanded. Then he turned to her and asked softly,
Would you like to accompany me to the royal performance today?
The Little Mermaid nodded eagerly. After the servants dressed her in a blue silk dress, the prince led her to the palace hall to introduce her to his parents.
How beautiful you are!
Exclaimed the queen.
Where do you come from?
But of course, the Little Mermaid could not answer. A tall woman entered the hall to perform for the prince and his parents. She sang very sweetly, and the prince clapped his hands in delight. The Little Mermaid sadly thought,
I once sang even more sweetly.
but as the Little Mermaid listened, she was surprised that she felt like dancing. She lifted her arms and her graceful feet glided across the floor. The Little Mermaid danced so magically that she charmed everyone, especially the prince.
You are so special.
He said.
I will always keep you with me and call you my little companion.
The Little Mermaid smiled up at him. Her eyes asked,
Is that a promise?
As time went on, the Little Mermaid became the prince's best friend. He took her with him wherever he went. They walked through the royal gardens and rode through the fields on horseback. They climbed mountains that almost reached the sky. And though she could not speak to him, she kept smiling, even as her feet stung with pain. The Little Mermaid, Chapter 12, The Mermaid and the Prince. At night, while the others slept, the Little Mermaid went up to the palace balcony. From there, she watched the waves and remembered her family beneath the sea. One night, she saw her sisters swimming in the waves far away.
We miss our dear little sister.
The oldest cried out. She, of course, could not reply. Instead, she thought,
I miss you too. But I will marry my prince and live happily in the upper world.
When she waved to her sisters, they recognized her. They swam closer up to the rocks. She held out her arms to show them she would hug them if she could. From then on, they came almost every night to sing to their sister. Once, she even saw the wise mermaid, who had not been up to the surface in many years. With her grandmother was her father, the Sea King. They stretched out their hands to her, but they did not come as close as her sisters. Her grandmother seemed to be saying, We miss you, our dear child. But the little mermaid still wanted a soul, and to be with the prince.
I love seeing the world with you, little companion.
The prince would say.
You are very dear to me.
Yet he never suggested making her his bride.
He sees me as his friend, but I need to be his wife.
The little mermaid thought.
And if he marries someone else, I will turn into foam on the waves.
She shivered, thinking about such a fate. Sometimes the little mermaid begged the prince with her eyes.
Please love me best of all. Love me enough to marry me.
When she looked at him that way, the prince would take her in his arms. He'd kiss her lightly on her forehead in a brotherly way. But the little mermaid hoped that this would change. One day, the queen announced to her husband,
It is time for the prince to marry.
she wanted him to marry a princess from a neighboring kingdom.
Let's arrange for them to meet.
She told him. When the prince heard about this, he shook his head.
I will never marry that princess, little companion.
He said.
I can only marry the one I truly love.
Then he told the little mermaid his story.
Once, I was on a ship that sank, and I almost drowned. Luckily, I was swept ashore. When I opened my eyes, I saw the girl who had saved my life. Her name is Maiden, and she brought me inside a nearby church. When I awoke the next day, she was gone. Though I saw her only once, that girl is the only person I would wed. Unless I find her, I will never marry.
But it was I who saved you.
Thought the little mermaid.
Please try to understand.
But the prince could not understand, and only smiled at her.
Oh, little companion, do not feel sad because of my story. Even though I will never find her, I am happy with you by my side.
If only he knew the truth.
She thought.
Someday, the prince will realize that I love him more than anyone does. And in time, he will marry me.
She would have to be patient for a little while longer.